Early in your career, hard work compounds. You put in the effort, you get better, you get noticed. And that equation, it works for a while. Then at some point, it quietly stops. Not with a warning, not with feedback, not with failure. Most people don't realize it's happened until they're already stuck. Because at that point, the organization stops rewarding effort on its own and starts rewarding what your effort makes possible. Before I go further, let me be clear about something. If you're early in your career, still building the core skills, still figuring out how your role works, this probably isn't for you yet. Hard work should still compound here. But if you're a senior individual contributor, say a lead, a principal, or someone carrying responsibility without real authority, and you've had that quiet thought of, why does this feel harder but not better? Then this will probably feel uncomfortably familiar. Most of us are taught to think of careers like interest. You put in consistent effort and the return grows over time. And early on, that model works because effort is easy to see, output is clear, improvement is measurable. But environments change. And when they do, effort doesn't disappear. What actually happens is more subtle. You're often doing more of the right things. What changes, however, is how your work is being interpreted. This is usually the phase where people start thinking things like, I'm involved in everything, but I don't feel like I'm actually driving much. I have more responsibility, but not much say. I'm constantly busy, but mostly my work is keeping the lights on. And the strangest part is this: nothing is obviously wrong. You're still relied on, you're still looped in, you're still trusted to handle things, but something has shifted. And this doesn't feel like burnout. So you're not disengaged, you're not depleted. It's the point where your effort still produces output, but it no longer produces trajectory. I've seen this pattern most clearly in large organizations, especially during large scale transformation efforts, where roles blur and pressure concentrates. One example that stayed with me was a team of architects that I worked with. So, highly capable, deeply experienced. They were the people leaders turned to whenever things got complicated. Ambiguous initiatives, they were pulled in. Cross functional problems, they were asked to stabilize them. If something needed to keep moving, this team became the default answer. And early on, their effort did compound. They gained more trust, more visibility, more responsibility. Leadership leaned on them because they delivered. But over time, something subtle happened. Nothing ever came off their plate. They were responsible for setting standards, which sounds like authority. And in some ways, it was. They shaped how things were supposed to be done. But outside of those standards, they actually didn't control anything strategic. They couldn't change priorities. They couldn't redirect work. From the outside, it looked like growth. People wanted to be in their shoes. Their expertise, it carried visible weight. But upstream, though, nothing shifted. Work kept flowing in the same way. The pressure didn't ease. And responsibility just kept accumulating. What their effort created was stability, not leverage. And stability rarely changes how you're positioned. Here's the part that is easy to miss. Once their work created stability, the organization started to depend on it. They absorbed ambiguity, they reduced risk, And this meant leadership pressure went down. Escalations got handled, things kept working. And because things were working, there was no reason to change their position. Their effort was doing exactly what the organization needed. It just wasn't changing how they were evaluated. And the way that showed up day to day was subtle, but very consistent. Early in a career, effort is the multiplier. At senior levels, however, effort becomes almost invisible. What matters instead is what your work unlocks for other people, what decisions it shapes, what continues without you. That is what actually compounds. Effort keeps things running. Leverage changes where you're positioned. And this is why hard work eventually hits a ceiling. Not because effort stopped mattering, but because effort stopped being what the organization responds to. At that point, progress becomes a function of position, not persistence. This isn't about doing less or disengaging. It's about understanding what the organization actually rewards. In the next video, I want to talk about why effort so often gets misinterpreted and why smart, capable people misread what's actually being evaluated. Because most stalls don't come from doing the wrong work, they come from being interpreted the wrong way. Most people don't need more effort, they need to understand why things stop moving for them. I'm Ola. I've spent my career working with senior teams and watching this pattern repeat.